Thinking Aloud. Conversations on the leading edge of knowledge and discovery with psychologist Jeffrey Mishlove.
Hello and welcome. I'm Jeffrey Mishlove. Today we are going to look at the ego and enlightenment. With me is Cate Montana, a woman who has had a career in journalism for 30 years. She is the author of several books, including Unearthing Venus, My Search for the Woman Within. Also, The Heart of the Matter and Ghetto Physics, and most recently, the E word, Ego, Enlightenment, and Other Essentials. Cate was also the editor for 3 years of a newsletter called The Bleeping Herald for fans of the film series What the Bleep. Welcome.
Thank you, Jeffrey. It's great to be here.
It's great to be with you. You know, I had a mentor many years ago, Arthur M. Young. He was an inventor and a cosmologist and a person, a deep student of the world's spiritual traditions. And he used to say something very interesting. He said to me, you know, everybody thinks they need to sacrifice their ego on the altar of spirituality. He said, but what most people don't realize is that you first have to develop an ego worth sacrificing.
That's a great truth. If we didn't have an ego, we wouldn't be able to have this conversation. We wouldn't be able to live these lives in these bodies and have the dream that we are these individual, isolated, standalone units called human beings, called Jeffrey and Cate, and have this experience. So the ego is an inevitable construct that allows us to function. It's a tool.
And Arthur went a little bit further. He would say that our very purpose here is not to lose our ego. Our purpose here is to master, to become masters of the world into which we've been placed.
Why not?
I mean, he was an inventor. He literally, he invented the helicopter, as a matter of fact, which is sort of the ultimate form of mastery. Yes, he invented what's known as the Bell helicopter, the first commercially licensed helicopter.
Wow.
So he had a strong feeling about our purpose is to master this world.
How about just live in it and do well?
Yeah.
I mean, I'll take that. Mastery always has this kind of, not to argue with the gentleman, but it always has this connotation of, I have to wrestle with it. But of course we wrestle and struggle anyway because we think we are individual human beings, egos, and that's all there is. Our senses, our bodies tell us 24/7, you know, that we're physical and that we're separate, and well, how else should I think? So it kind of like lends to that vulnerable state that we've talked about earlier, that I have to master this world to be able to survive in this world.
Master it, or no, you use the word wrestle. I like that word. And the reason I like it, and it's probably pertinent to this conversation, is having a Jewish background. You know, the famous story of Jacob and the ladder reaching up to heaven, and he wrestled all night with an angel. And after that, he was given a name by the angel, Yisrael, which actually means in the original Hebrew, one who wrestles with God.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so to me, that's authentic spirituality, is you wrestle with these issues. But
absolutely. I wrestled for 20 years before I finally gave up wrestling. And that was the moment when I had the breakthrough that changed my entire life. Back in 1997, I had hit the wall being a material girl and had everything that I needed, a great career, great husband, money in the bank, doing really well, miserable, get myself on the spiritual path, and because I'm a type A lean-in ego, I went for it. I was going to be enlightened. That was it. That was the E word I was after, because essentially I was not very happy with myself. I didn't really like myself all that much. I didn't think that well of myself. So I was insecure, and I was confused about life and what I was supposed to be doing and what my purpose was. And so I thought enlightenment was going to be it would take me out of myself. It would give me the answers that I so desperately desired. And so, you know, I read all the books and followed a couple of teachers, not very long. Mostly, I did my own thing. I had one question: who am I? That was it. I really wanted to know the truth. Who am I? And so I didn't do any training in meditation. I just thought meditation was a matter of rolling my eyes, closing my eyes, and rolling my eyes back and looking within.
Yeah.
What's in there? Who am I? What's in there? And I did that sometimes 24/7. And I isolated myself. I left my career in network television to go live in the woods. I lived in a one-room cabin with no running water and no electricity in the middle of nowhere. $25 a month rent, though, which meant I could afford it, doing nothing and not working. But I just pursued my inner understanding and meditated my ass off, basically. And then when I came out of that, and I finally ran out of money, even at $25 a month, I developed my whole life and my career as a journalist around my spiritual pursuits. I could write from home. I could interview people over the phone. I could then spend more time meditating. So I was just on it all the time.
Yeah.
And finally, one morning in 1997, I woke up at my typical 4 o'clock in the morning, went downstairs, looked at my meditation pillow, and just went, I can't do this anymore. I was just exhausted with the struggle, with the striving, with the seeking, with this aggressive, I have to destroy my ego, I have to get rid of myself, I have to dissolve myself. Never mind, I didn't even know who that self was. And all of this stuff. And I just hit the wall, Jeffrey. And I said, to hell with it. Actually, I said something much stronger than that. And I plopped down on my pillow. And I gave up. And in that moment, Cate Montana, the whole ego structure just simply evaporated. And a timeless time later, when I came back and opened my eyes, I was like, it was the biggest cosmic joke in the world. It was like, oh, hell, what am I going to do with this? And oh, hell, I'm back. What am I going to do with that? And so, but the cosmic joke is in that, and I can't even call it an experience, because to use the word I had an experience means that there was an I around to have the experience. The experience was there was no I. There was simply life, existence, awareness, consciousness, infinite, peaceful, yummy, gorgeous, blissful, all the words, all the right words. And then, of course, I spent the next year of my life aggressively going after that again, because I was like, oh my God, I have to get back to that place. Let alone, never mind, there was no me in that place. The peace and the exquisiteness and the obvious truth of the matter that we're all one and that life just is. It was all so easy.
And that state of pure bliss, I gather, from your writing and from many great spiritual teachings, it's always there.
It's always there. It's always there. All the Sturm und Drang in the head covers it up and disguises it.
In my own experience, what you went through is exactly the way to do it. It's like, it does require striving, ironically. Even though there's nothing that needs to strive, the process of striving, tightening up, and then letting go seems to be, in my experience, that's what creates the opening for these great epiphanies.
Yeah, absolutely. The personality has to run out of rope. We don't know any other way to function than as physical beings. And we don't know any true peace or measure of sweetness of spirit and consistency, and let alone bliss, as human beings, because we live in a polarized, dualized, yin-yang, positive, negative, male-female world where there's all this dynamic tension. And there is always this inevitable, inescapable sense of I am an isolated self, I'm an isolated human being, physical.
Things I love and things
I
I
hate, things that drive me crazy, things I yearn for, all of those, all of that.
Yeah. One of the things that you write about when it comes to enlightenment, which is, it resonated with me quite a bit, and I haven't read much other writers who bring this up, and that is, you say, we shouldn't talk about enlightenment, we should talk about endeadenment.
Yes. Well, that was one of the things that pissed me off when I came back from that state, was that there was no way I could survive enlightenment.
Yeah.
Enlightenment is the absence of Cate Montana altogether. Enlightenment is the absence of any sense of personal self having enlightenment or having bliss or having peace or having awareness. So, so I called it divine suicide. There's two ways out in this world for the personality. For Jeffrey and for Cate, there's two ways out. We can either die by enlightenment, or we can die, the old-fashioned way.
A natural death.
the natural physical death, yeah. But the ego exits either way. And so the big conundrum for me was, well, heck, I'm either Cate Montana with all of her issues and unhappiness and fleeting joys, or I am. One or the other. And it was like, well, where is this liberation that we're taught we're supposed to attain? If I'm enlightened, I'm not enlightened. There is simply I am, isness, awareness. There is no I around. There's nobody home to appreciate being liberated. There's no, yes, I did it, da-da-da-da-da, I did it, nada, which is why I was so pissed. It was like rats.
If you look, however, at the sociology of New Age culture, spirituality, and so on, you see a lot of what has sometimes been labeled as spiritual materialism. People who go to workshops and seminars for the purpose, ultimately, of gratifying their own ego. It seems self-defeating.
It's kind of inevitable, Jeffrey, because if our bodies and brains give us the inescapable message 24/7, I am physical, I am separate, how else can we think other than in physical terms? Even when we're talking about particle physics, and there's no such thing as a physical particle, the word itself conjures up little images of a marble or a tiny little brick that's the building block of matter. But quantum physics tells us that it's all just waves of boundaryless energy, information, consciousness, whatever we want to call
probability waves.
Probability waves. But the fact that we live in these temples of flesh gives us this inescapable dynamic. I'm physical, therefore I have to take care of myself, and I think of God in physical terms. I ascribe give him a gender and a white beard and park him in heaven, or and naturally, we want safety and security, we want beauty, we want peace, we want lovely things. Those are just normal. And so, of course, we stray into spiritual materialism. And, working with the filmmakers of What the Bleep Do We Know, I mean, I can just look square in the mirror at my own being and go, man, I was one of those people at the forefront talking about personal manifestation and how my mind affects the quantum field and is going to bring me that Maserati or that gorgeous house or whatever I want. And I am responsible, and I have to get, I cannot afford the luxury of a negative thought. And that's ever going to happen. I'm never going to have a negative thought. It's just like, whoa, talk about putting the bar high on our spiritual expectations. It's like, good luck with that. But we can't escape these material yearnings and these material ways of looking at the world and looking at God and looking at spirituality. So that's one of the traps, and it really was a shocker to me to realize after 15, 20 years of being a spiritual person, and a very intense one, that I had just taken on another persona. I had dug my ego deeper. Now I wasn't just a human being, Cate Montana woman, writer, you know, white chick material girl. I had that identity, but now I added the spiritual identity.
If you have all of this knowledge, spiritual knowledge at your disposal, you can put on quite an act.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the reasons, I'll be perfectly honest, that I wanted to be enlightened in the first place was so I could get there before all my friends and strut my stuff and be a teacher. I was like, wow, yeah, just get me there first. I don't care if anybody else comes along behind me.
Well, wanting, you know, we need teachers. Teachers are very important.
Absolutely.
And yet the desire to become a guru is a trap in itself.
Absolutely. And I'm very, very grateful. I'm infinitely grateful, Jeffrey, that now that the book is out and I'm getting the message from clear as a bell from Spirit that it is now time for me to take off my writer hat and put on a teacher hat, that this didn't happen years ago, because I would have been one of those trapped, hoisted on my own petard, trapped by my ego image of, oh, look at me and look what I know, and oh, I can help you, you poor lowly creature. Yes, I wouldn't have been that nauseating, but you know, I still would have built my own spiritual prison. And I'm just grateful that all of this has happened now when I know better. I know better than to take myself seriously. It's not Cate Montana. Yes, I have the Cate Montana name, and it's how I present myself. And if I wasn't Cate Montana and still didn't have a personality, you and I wouldn't be able to. It's on
your driver's license.
It's on my driver's license. It's on my address, you know, and it helps me function in the world.
Well, I'd like to talk a bit about the spiritual teachers that you found in India, who explained to you that you put it in your words. So.
You know, it was interesting. It was after my own breakthrough into non-dual consciousness that I actually ended up with a teacher, which I never expected or wanted. His name is Sadhguru. He's from Coimbatore, India. And I met him because a friend of mine who had a very large spiritual ego, I went out of the country for a couple of years, and when I came back, she was a totally altered human being. She had set so much of her stuff aside. And I was like, oh my golly, what did you do? And she said, well, I went to this teacher. So, because I was still Cate Montana, and I was somewhat trapped in this, I'm still Cate Montana, and then I'm not Cate Montana in deep meditation. And so there was this constant chronic ping pong between my tortured human self, okay, let's be honest, and this spacious, gracious, beautiful place. And I didn't know how to bridge the two. I didn't think there was a way to bridge the two. So I looked for a teacher, and Sadhguru gave me some great answers about enlightenment, and that most people who actually attain enlightenment depart within a couple of weeks. I was very confused in this dual place of being Cate Montana one minute, and then in deep meditation being this sublime, spacious consciousness.
In fact, I recall you wrote about that very vividly.
I did.
In your book, and how you tried to discuss this polarity you were experiencing, and nobody else seemed to understand what you were going through.
Nobody seemed to. And so I was so caught between, I actually called it the two realities, the human reality and the non-human.
And I suppose reality. To be fair, you also wrote about, you know, having a very difficult childhood.
Whose childhood isn't difficult in some respects?
Mine wasn't like yours, I can say that. And, you know, I do think it's a very interesting dynamic. People who have had traumatic experiences in childhood, it gives them an extra burden, and often that's accompanied by various psychic and spiritual breakthroughs.
That's true. That's true. Perhaps greater impetus, booting you in that direction just to relieve yourself of that particular form of torment that's part of our mind and our personal stories and where we go with them.
There's some research to that effect.
Absolutely, there is. So I wanted to find out, I wanted resolution desperately. So I ended up with my friend taking me to see Sadhguru, and I was so impressed that, and he offers yogic kriyas. There's no philosophy, there's no teaching, there's no this is how it is.
But can you define kriya?
Kriya is really an energetic practice, a sadhana. And it was to unite the energies, the physical, the emotional, the mental, with a chi, basically, with the life force, so that there's one unified unit. I knew I needed some sort of physical grounding, some sort of physical unification discipline to match while I was in this neither fish nor fowl state. And it wasn't until and it was Sadhguru who talked about, oh my God, that most people who achieve enlightenment, if they manage to retain the body for 2 weeks, that they usually are out of there by the end of that 2 weeks. The consciousness is no longer attached to this.
It's totally understandable, because we're talking about cosmic consciousness would be one way of expressing it, a simultaneous awareness of everything. And I've had the personality drop even during the day. It just happens sometimes. The cape just goes away, and then she comes back. And it wasn't until I started writing the book in 2014, the E Word, that the resolution finally showed up. That there is a middle ground between the human tormented, yearning place and egoless enlightenment. And it's called the transpersonal consciousness. Transpersonal consciousness.
Transpersonal consciousness.
You
Abraham
write about
Maslow
that very
talks
eloquently.
And so this is the place where human beings can be liberated, because there's no one home in enlightenment to enjoy being liberated. There's no, I got it.
That's
yeah,
the
I
irony.
did it. That's the irony. But there is a place of liberation where we are no longer confused by the sensory input that tells us that we are isolated standalone units called human beings that ground us in our physicality and our separation, and therefore our fear, our confusion. The middle stage of transpersonal awareness is when we evolve the ego consciously. We recognize the ego for the tool that it is. We can marshal it, we use it. If I didn't have an ego and you didn't have an ego, we wouldn't be talking. There would be nothing to talk about. There would be no journey. So it's a very necessary, inevitable construct. It's beautiful. There's nothing wrong with the ego. And it's also impossible to dissolve it, because you can't dissolve what you are, but you can expand it. That's the trick. Not inflate, but expand your perception of who you are and start to see things from a more quantum, a more mystical perspective. And throughout the book, I go into a lot of different exercises and ways that we can train the brain to see in a more connected
To some extent,
fashion.
it's an intellectual process, I gather.
To some extent, absolutely. We've got to know about something first before we can act on it. So yeah, we have the intellectual understanding of quantum physics and the mystical perceptions. Yes, my father and I are one. My neighbor and I are one. Yes. So we have that intellectual grounding. And then there comes actual experience. For example, a very simple martial arts exercise called soft eyes. Martial artists are trained to not fixate their gaze on their opponent, but to just look in that direction, but softly, not fixedly, which opens up the field of vision to almost 360 degrees, so that an attacker coming from the sides can't surprise you. But what it also does is, taking a soft-eyed view, begins to train the brain to think in a more surround way. And it's also, in soft eyes, is a way that we can take the intellectual knowledge of quantum physics, everything is a quark. There's no boundary between you and me.
Yeah.
This is really an endless, boundaryless quantum sea, and there's no differentiation.
Yep.
That's intellectual knowledge. But I can sit here in soft eyes and look in your direction, and I can imagine that it's an endless quantum sea.
It can become experiential.
It can become experiential.
Yeah.
We just have to retrain how we perceive.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of other exercises I do, like when I go for a walk. I greet a beautiful plant, a flower, a deer, an eagle flying overhead, and I can't help but go, oh my God, you're so beautiful. And in that same moment, I remind myself, oh my God, that's me. I am so beautiful. And so I try to see myself in all things and people.
Uh-huh. In other words, everything that is in your consciousness, your experience of the whole world is really you.
Yes, because it really is me.
That's
Not Cate Montana me,
yeah.
but me. You and I are one.
That's very profound thought, and it's a good note to conclude our interview on. I feel like the best interviews I've ever done in my life end on this note. So, Cate Montana, what a pleasure to share this time with you. Thank you so much.
Fleeting time, and it's been wonderful. Thank
Yeah.
you, Jeffrey.
And thank you for being with us.